My name is Elena Rodriguez, and 6 months ago, I was convinced my career in commercial real estate was over before it had really begun. I was 28, working as a junior associate at Meridian Properties, one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms, and I had just experienced the most humiliating moment of my professional life. But before I tell you exactly how my manager's cruelty became the catalyst for the most incredible comeback in corporate history, and how his arrogance cost him everything while making me a millionaire, could you take a second to like this video and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will show you how one moment of workplace bullying can backfire in ways that seem impossible until you witness $50 million in contracts changing hands right in front of your eyes. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything changed. I had been working for 3 months on what everyone called the impossible deal, trying to convince tech billionaire Marcus Blackwell to choose our firm for his new Manhattan headquarters. Blackwell Industries was looking to lease an entire 40-story building, and the commission alone would be worth more than most people make in 5 years. My manager, David Chen, had made it clear from day one that he didn't think I belonged in commercial real estate. "This isn't residential, sweetheart," he'd say with that condescending smile. "We're talking about deals that could buy entire neighborhoods, not cute little apartments for young couples." But I had done my homework. I knew Blackwell's company inside and out. I understood their expansion plans, their corporate culture, their sustainability requirements. I had crafted what I believed was the perfect proposal. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in our main conference room. The entire sales team would be there. It was supposedly a learning opportunity for everyone to see how major deals were pitched. But as I walked into that room, carrying my carefully prepared presentation materials, I could feel the skeptical stares. 12 seasoned agents, mostly men in their 40s and 50s, watching the young Latina associate try to play in their league. David stood at the head of the table, checking his Rolex with theatrical impatience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we're about to see what happens when ambition exceeds ability. Elena here thinks she can land Marcus Blackwell." The room filled with barely suppressed chuckles. I had spent weeks preparing. My presentation wasn't just about square footage and lease terms. It was a comprehensive business strategy showing how our building could become the centerpiece of Blackwell's East Coast operations. I had researched every detail, from the building's LEED certification to the proximity to his other business interests, from transportation logistics to the symbolic value of the address for his company's brand image. But as I began my presentation, setting up my slides and materials, David kept interrupting. "Are you seriously suggesting that Blackwell Industries cares about the building's energy flow?" He scoffed when I mentioned the feng shui principles incorporated into the design. "This is business, not fortune-telling." Every point I made, he undermined. When I discussed the building's technological infrastructure, he rolled his eyes. "Elena, they have their own IT team. They don't need you to explain servers." When I presented the financial projections, he shook his head dismissively. "These numbers are amateur hour. You're thinking like someone selling condos, not corporate headquarters." The other agents began to shift uncomfortably in their chairs. This wasn't constructive criticism. This was public humiliation. But I pressed on, hoping that my research and preparation would speak for itself. Then came the moment that still makes my hands shake with rage. I was explaining how the building's location could serve as a strategic hub for Blackwell's planned expansion into Europe, when David stood up abruptly. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "This is embarrassing. Elena, your presentation is garbage, pure amateur garbage." He walked over to where I had laid out my carefully prepared materials, charts, building plans, financial projections, all bound in leather portfolios that had cost me 2 weeks' coffee budget to produce. Without warning, he swept his arm across the table, sending everything crashing to the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. My charts tore as they hit the legs of chairs, and one of my portfolios landed in someone's coffee cup. "You're wasting everyone's time," he continued, standing over the mess he'd created. "Blackwell Industries is worth $50 billion. They don't need some junior associate trying to explain business to them. This deal requires experience, sophistication, and frankly, more credibility than you'll ever have." The room was dead silent. I dropped to my knees and began gathering my soaked, torn presentation materials, my face burning with shame and anger. Some of the other agents looked away, clearly uncomfortable with David's brutality, but no one said a word. No one helped me pick up the papers. "Maybe it's time you considered going back to residential," David said, his voice softer now, but somehow more cruel. "There's no shame in knowing your limitations." That's when my phone buzzed. I was still on the floor, stuffing ruined papers into my bag, when I saw the unknown number. Normally, I would never answer during a meeting, but I was so rattled, so desperate to escape that room, that I answered without thinking. "Hello? Is this Elena Rodriguez?" The voice was deep, authoritative, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "Yes, speaking. This is Marcus Blackwell." My heart stopped. I looked up at David, who was still standing over me with that satisfied smirk, and then toward the conference room door. That's when I saw him. Marcus Blackwell was standing in the doorway of our conference room. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with silver hair and the kind of presence that immediately commands attention. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and holding a phone to his ear, the same call I was on. "I've been standing here for the past 10 minutes, he said, both into the phone and directly to the room, watching what I can only describe as the most unprofessional display I've ever witnessed in 30 years of business. David's face went white. The entire room seemed to freeze. Marcus Blackwell ended the call and stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the scattered papers on the floor, then moving to David, then settling on me. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, "I'd like to speak with you privately." The next 20 minutes changed everything. Marcus led me to a smaller conference room down the hall, where he helped me spread out what remained of my presentation materials on the table. As I explained my proposal, nervously at first, then with growing confidence, he asked thoughtful questions, took notes, and nodded approvingly at several of my suggestions. "You did something that no one else has done," he told me when I finished. "You didn't just try to sell me a building. You created a vision for how that building could serve my company's future. The feng shui analysis, the European expansion hub concept, the sustainability metrics. You understood that this isn't just about office space. It's about creating an environment where my company can thrive for the next 20 years. He leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. "How long have you been in commercial real estate?" 8 months, I admitted, expecting him to lose interest immediately. Instead, he smiled. "And before that? I have an MBA from Columbia and worked for 3 years in corporate strategy consulting." I had never mentioned my consulting background at Meridian. David had made it clear that he wasn't interested in hearing about my irrelevant previous experience. "Corporate strategy," Marcus repeated. "That explains why your presentation felt different. You weren't just selling me square footage. You were solving business problems." He stood up and walked to the window overlooking Manhattan. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to make you an offer. But first, I need you to understand something. What I witnessed in that conference room was not just unprofessional. It was abusive. No employee should ever be treated that way, regardless of their experience level or the quality of their work. And your work, by the way, was exceptional." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I want Meridian Properties to handle my headquarters lease," he continued. "It's a 5-year deal worth approximately $50 million. But I have 2 conditions. First, you will be the primary contact on this account. Not David Chen, not anyone else. You. Second, I want a formal apology from your company's leadership for what happened today. And I want assurance that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated." I stared at him, unable to speak. $50 million. The largest deal in Meridian's history. "Can you handle a contract of this magnitude?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Absolutely, yes." "Good. I'll have my legal team contact you directly tomorrow morning. And Elena?" He paused at the door. "That presentation you gave, or tried to give, was brilliant. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." When I walked back into the main conference room, David and the other agents were still there, huddled in worried conversation. They looked up as I entered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and dread. "So," David said, trying to sound casual, What did Blackwell want? I looked at him for a long moment, remembering the humiliation I had felt just an hour earlier, seeing my torn presentation materials still scattered near the trash can where someone had swept them. He wanted to inform me that Blackwell Industries has chosen Meridian Properties for their Manhattan headquarters. I said calmly. It's a 5-year lease worth $50 million. The room erupted. 12 experienced agents started talking at once, congratulations and questions flying in every direction. But David just stared at me, his face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and dawning realization. That's incredible, Elena, he stammered. We'll need to transition the account to someone with more experience handling contracts of this size, but actually, I interrupted, Mr. Blackwell was very specific. He wants me as the primary contact. He said he was impressed with my strategic approach and my understanding of his company's long-term vision. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. There is one more thing, I continued. Mr. Blackwell witnessed what happened during my presentation today. He was quite disturbed by what he called unprofessional and abusive behavior. He's requested a formal meeting with senior management to discuss workplace conduct standards. That's when I saw something in David's eyes I had never seen before. Fear. The color drained from his face as the implications hit him. A $50 million client complaining about his conduct directly to senior management wasn't just a reprimand, it was career suicide. The other agents in the room suddenly found their shoes very interesting, the celebratory atmosphere evaporating like morning mist. Elena, I think there might be some misunderstanding, David began, but I cut him off. Mr. Blackwell was very clear about what he witnessed, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. He'll be calling Mr. Harrison directly to schedule that meeting. Robert Harrison was Meridian's managing partner, a man whose reputation for swift and decisive action was legendary in Manhattan real estate circles. David knew this as well as anyone. That afternoon, while I sat at my desk trying to process the morning's surreal events, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Harrison's extension. Elena, please come to my office immediately. His voice was crisp, professional. And bring everything related to the Blackwell account. Harrison's corner office occupied prime real estate on the 34th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park. I had only been in this office twice before, once during my interview and once during orientation. Now I was walking in as the agent responsible for the largest deal in company history. Harrison was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the kind of presence that commanded respect without demanding it. He gestured for me to sit across from his mahogany desk. I just finished a very interesting conversation with Marcus Blackwell. He began, his fingers steepled in front of him. He was quite complimentary about your presentation and professionalism. He was considerably less complimentary about David Chen's conduct during your team meeting. I remained silent, unsure how much detail Blackwell had shared. He described what he witnessed as workplace bullying of the most egregious kind, and suggested that if this is how Meridian treats its employees, he might need to reconsider doing business with us at all. Harrison's eyes never left mine. A $50 million client expressing concerns about our corporate culture is something I take very seriously. Mr. Harrison, He held up a hand. Let me finish. Mr. Blackwell also told me something else interesting. He said that your presentation was the most strategically sound proposal he's seen in years. He was particularly impressed with your corporate strategy background and suggested that we might not be utilizing your skills effectively. Harrison stood and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. Elena, I'm going to be frank with you. I've received complaints about David's management style before, but nothing this concrete, and never from a client of Blackwell's caliber. This morning's incident, combined with landing our biggest account ever, puts us in a unique position. He turned back to face me. I want you to tell me exactly what happened in that conference room. Every detail. For the next 20 minutes, I recounted the morning's events. Harrison listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Elena, what I'm about to ask you needs to stay between us for now. Have you noticed other instances of Problematic behavior from David, either toward you or other team members. This was the moment I had been unconsciously preparing for. Over the past 8 months, I had kept detailed notes of every interaction with David, initially as a way to track my progress and identify areas for improvement, but increasingly as documentation of a pattern of behavior that went far beyond tough management. Yes, I said simply. I have. Harrison's eyebrows raised slightly. Can you be specific? I opened my portfolio and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. I keep detailed records of all my professional interactions. It helps me track patterns and improve my performance. But in reviewing David's feedback over the past 8 months, I've noticed some concerning trends. I flipped through several pages, finding the entries I needed. 3 months ago, I generated a lead for a potential office space lease in Midtown. A contact from my previous consulting work mentioned their company was looking to expand. I passed the information to David, as protocol requires. 2 weeks later, I saw that David had closed a deal with that exact company, but my name wasn't mentioned in any of the paperwork. Harrison made a note. Continue. Last month, I noticed that 2 other junior associates, both male, were invited to client dinners and networking events that I wasn't informed about, despite working on related accounts. When I asked David about the oversight, he said that those events were better suited for agents with more gravitas. I flipped to another page. There's also the matter of the Brennan Industries preliminary meeting in February. I had done extensive research on their space requirements and prepared a proposal, but David reassigned the account to Jake Morrison the day before the presentation, saying he needed someone with more traditional real estate experience. Harrison was writing more rapidly now. Do you have documentation of these incidents? Yes. Email exchanges, my research files, and detailed notes of conversations. I hesitated, then decided to take the plunge. Mr. Harrison, I also have audio recordings. His pen stopped moving. Audio recordings? New York is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, I said carefully. After the second incident where credit for my work was reassigned to someone else, I began recording my meetings with David. Initially, it was for my own review, to analyze my presentation skills and identify areas for improvement. But the recordings also captured other things. Harrison leaned forward. What kind of other things? I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Would you like me to play some excerpts? For the next hour, Harrison listened to carefully selected portions of my recorded conversations with David. The recordings painted a clear picture of systematic undermining, condescension, and what any HR professional would recognize as a hostile work environment. There were comments about my accent, my age, my appearance, and repeated suggestions that I wasn't Meridian material. When the final recording ended, Harrison sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Elena, this is extremely serious. These recordings, combined with today's incident and Mr. Blackwell's complaint, suggest a pattern of behavior that's not only unprofessional, but potentially illegal. He was quiet for a moment. I need to ask you directly, do you intend to take legal action against the company? The question I had been dreading. Mr. Harrison, my goal has never been to cause problems for Meridian. I love working here, and I believe in what we do. But I also believe that I deserve to be treated with the same respect and given the same opportunities as my colleagues. That's not exactly an answer to my question. I took a deep breath. I have no intention of pursuing legal action, provided that the situation is addressed appropriately and that all employees are treated fairly going forward. Harrison nodded slowly. I appreciate your directness. Now, let's discuss the Blackwell account. This is obviously a career-defining opportunity for you, but it's also a massive responsibility. Are you confident you can handle a contract of this magnitude? Yes, absolutely. The conviction in my voice surprised even me. I've already begun preparing a comprehensive project timeline, and I've identified the key stakeholders on both sides who will need to be involved in the negotiation process. Good. You'll be working directly with our legal team and our senior contracts specialist, but you'll remain the primary point of contact for Blackwell Industries. Harrison paused. Elena, I want you to understand something. What happened today is going to have consequences, significant ones. David Chen's behavior was unacceptable, and it put our relationship with a major client at risk. That cannot stand. He stood up, signaling that our meeting was coming to an end. I'll be having a conversation with David this afternoon. I'll also be conducting a broader review of management practices within our commercial division. In the meantime, I want you to focus entirely on the Blackwell account. You'll have whatever resources you need to ensure this deal closes successfully. As I gathered my materials and prepared to leave, Harrison spoke again. One more thing, Elena. I've been in this business for 35 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen an agent land a deal of this magnitude in their first year. What happened to you today was unacceptable, but your response was exemplary. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong here. I left Harrison's office with my head spinning. Within 6 hours, I had gone from being publicly humiliated to becoming the primary agent on the company's largest deal ever. But I knew the real challenges were just beginning. Word travels fast in a Manhattan real estate firm, and by the next morning, everyone knew that David Chen had been called into Harrison's office for what sources described as a lengthy and heated discussion. When David didn't appear at his usual 8:30 a.m. desk time, speculation ran wild. I was at my computer, working on a detailed project timeline for the Blackwell account, when Jake Morrison approached my desk. Jake was one of the more senior associates, a man in his early 40s who had always been professional but distant in his interactions with me. Elena, he said quietly, can we talk privately for a minute? We walked to one of the smaller conference rooms, where Jake closed the door behind us. I wanted to apologize, he began, for yesterday for not saying anything when he did what he did. It was wrong, and I should have spoken up. I was surprised by his directness. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. There's something else, he continued. The Brennan Industries deal that got reassigned to me in February? I knew you had done all the preliminary work. David told me you had requested the reassignment because you felt overwhelmed. But after yesterday, I realized that wasn't true. My suspicions confirmed, but I kept my expression neutral. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you need me to document what really happened with that account, or any other accounts where David took credit for your work, I'm willing to make a formal statement. Jake paused. David's been playing games for years, but most of us were too focused on our own deals to pay attention. Yesterday opened our eyes. That afternoon, Marcus Blackwell himself arrived at our offices for what Harrison had described as a preliminary contract discussion. I met him in the main lobby, my hands slightly trembling despite my best efforts to project confidence. Elena, he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. Ready to make some history? The next 3 hours were unlike anything I had experienced in my brief real estate career. Marcus wasn't just a client. He was a teacher, a mentor, and occasionally, a co-conspirator. As we reviewed his company's requirements and my proposed solutions, he offered insights into negotiation strategy that I knew would serve me for years to come. The key to any major deal, he told me as we discussed lease terms, isn't just getting what you want. It's understanding what the other party needs and finding ways to give them more value than they expected. Your original presentation understood this. That's why it worked. As our meeting was wrapping up, Marcus asked a question that caught me off guard. Elena, what do you know about Meridian's ownership structure? I know that Robert Harrison is the managing partner, and there are several other senior partners who own stakes in the company. Why? Marcus smiled mysteriously. Just curious. I always like to understand the organizations I'm working with. He gathered his papers and stood to leave. Oh, and Elena? Don't be surprised if I have some additional proposals for you in the coming weeks. This headquarters lease is just the beginning of what I hope will be a very long and profitable relationship. That evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, I noticed David's door was closed and his lights were off. It was only 6 p.m., early by Meridian standards, where most agents worked until at least 8. His absence felt ominous. The next morning brought clarity. Harrison called an all-hands meeting for 9 a.m., gathering the entire commercial division in the main conference room. The same room where, just 2 days earlier, I had been humiliated in front of my colleagues. Harrison stood at the head of the table, his expression serious. I want to address recent events directly and transparently. he began. Over the past 48 hours, our firm has secured the largest contract in our history, thanks to the exceptional work of Elena Rodriguez. At the same time, we've had to address some serious concerns about workplace conduct and professional standards. He paused, letting his words sink in. Effective immediately, David Chen is no longer with Meridian Properties. His departure is the result of behavior that falls far short of our professional standards and our commitment to maintaining a respectful workplace for all employees. The room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Elena Rodriguez will be taking over David's responsibilities for the commercial division, effective immediately. She will also retain primary responsibility for the Blackwell Industries account and all related business opportunities. Harrison's eyes found mine across the table. Elena, would you like to say a few words? I stood slowly, my heart pounding. 2 days ago, I had been on my knees in this room, gathering scattered papers while my manager called my work garbage. Now I was being put in charge of the department. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I want everyone to know that my goal is to build on the strong foundation that already exists here. We have incredible talent in this room, and I look forward to working with each of you to continue growing our client base and closing deals that benefit everyone. I paused, thinking about what Marcus had taught me about understanding what people need. I also want to be clear about my management philosophy. Everyone's contributions will be recognized and credited appropriately. Everyone's ideas will be heard and considered. And everyone will be treated with the respect and professionalism they deserve. As the meeting disbanded and my colleagues, my new team, filed out, several stopped to congratulate me or offer their support. Jake Morrison was among them. Elena, he said, I meant what I said yesterday. If you need any documentation about David's past behavior, or if you want to discuss transitioning any of his accounts, I'm here to help. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that more than you know. As the room emptied, Harrison approached me. Elena, walk with me. We went to his office where he closed the door and gestured for me to sit. I want you to understand what just happened, he said. In 35 years, I've never promoted someone to department head after 8 months. But what you accomplished in the past 2 days, landing our biggest client, handling a difficult situation with grace and professionalism, and demonstrating leadership qualities that most agents never develop, convinced me that conventional timelines don't apply to you. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a thick folder. David's departure wasn't just about yesterday's incident. The recordings you provided, combined with testimonials from other employees who came forward after our meeting, painted a picture of systematic misconduct that could have exposed the company to significant legal liability. Harrison slid the folder across to me. This contains documentation of every account David managed, every deal he closed, and every lead he developed over the past 3 years. What you'll find interesting is how many of those leads originated with junior associates who never received proper credit. My heart rate quickened. How many? 17 verified instances where credit was inappropriately assigned. The financial impact to those associates, in terms of commission and career advancement, is substantial. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Elena, I'm not just promoting you because you landed the Blackwell account. I'm promoting you because you demonstrated something that's increasingly rare in this business: integrity. That evening, I sat in my small studio apartment in Queens, staring at the Manhattan skyline through my window. My phone had been buzzing constantly with congratulations from colleagues, friends, and family members who had heard about my promotion. But I kept thinking about Marcus Blackwell's mysterious question about Meridian's ownership structure. My curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and began researching, using the same investigative skills that had served me well in corporate strategy consulting. What I found made me sit back in my chair with amazement. Marcus Blackwell wasn't just looking for office space. Over the past 6 months, he had been quietly acquiring real estate assets throughout Manhattan, building a portfolio that suggested a much larger strategy. And according to public filings, he had recently formed a subsidiary company focused specifically on commercial real estate acquisitions and management. The pieces clicked into place. The Blackwell Industries headquarters lease wasn't just a rental agreement. It was an audition. Marcus was evaluating Meridian Properties not just as a service provider, but as a potential acquisition target. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Marcus's number. It was 10 p.m., probably too late to call, but something told me he'd answer. Elena. His voice was warm despite the late hour. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. The lease is just the beginning, isn't it? Very good. Yes, it is. I could hear the smile in his voice. I've been looking for the right commercial real estate firm to anchor my East Coast expansion. Meridian has the reputation and the client base, but I needed to see the quality of the people. Your presentation told me everything I needed to know about your capabilities. Yesterday's incident told me everything I needed to know about the company's character. My mind was racing. What are you proposing? That's a conversation for another day. But I will say this. The young woman who impressed me with her strategic thinking and professional grace is exactly the kind of leader I want to work with long-term. Get comfortable in your new role, Elena. I have a feeling you're going to be very busy in the months ahead. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my story was far from over. The humiliation I had experienced in that conference room had been transformed into something I never could have imagined. Not just career success, but the opportunity to help build something entirely new. David Chen's cruelty had backfired in ways he could never have anticipated. His arrogance and bullying had cost him his career, while opening doors for me that I was only beginning to understand. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives create the foundation for our greatest triumphs. And this was just the beginning.